Libya has turned an apocalyptic orange. That's all coming up on The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Good evening. Let's talk about TikTok. 1.5 billion people use it every month, spending an average of 52 minutes scrolling through content. To many of us, it's the home of endless silly cat videos and viral dance routines. But to politicians in Washington, it's a huge security risk. The fact that it gathers the data of 170 million American users is a weakness, they say. A weakness that could be exploited by China. The US president has been actively campaigning on the social media platform, but today he signed a bill demanding it be sold or completely banned. TikTok's CEO has vowed to take his fight to the courts. Tonight, we'll hear from an influencer who makes a living from posting videos about how he'll be affected. And we'll ask whether the government here could take similar action. All that coming up, but let's get started with our first report from our technology correspondent, Aarti Nachiappan.
This one?
170 million users.
The most jammiest, runniest eggs ever.
Countless communities.
Say goodbye to your followers, your favorite creator.
This is what's at risk after President Biden signed a bill that could ban TikTok in the United States. Officials are worried that its parent company ByteDance, which is headquartered in Beijing, could be forced to hand over data on American users to the Chinese government. The bill gives TikTok 9 months to transfer ownership out of China, or it will be removed from app stores. But TikTok's not going down without a fight.
Rest assured, we aren't going anywhere. We are confident and we will keep fighting for your rights in the courts.
A legal challenge could take years to resolve. And even President Biden is to continue using the platform for his re-election campaign.
So many of you guys had questions about how we make our beef food. Come with me and I'll show you.
But nerves are already high for some creators who rely on the app for their livelihoods.
It's an amazing resource for us. We probably wouldn't be as large a farm as we are in our community if it wasn't for TikTok, because that's how we were able to connect with the community. I struggle with social interaction with people outside of the farm, which is why we went into farming, was for mental health. And so it makes me sad because I, for the first time in my entire life, have thousands of friends and people that I can communicate with.
Protecting users' data is what policymakers say is their main concern. But American social media companies also gather similar data on their users. What's more important here is what the ban tells us about America's relationship with China.
The political context for the TikTok ban in America is part of a long-running saga between the US and China, which is expressed through tensions on technology. It can be summarized as the US is really wary of China as a technological superpower.
On the face of it, a ban sounds final. But this is only the beginning of a long process. The next stage is in the courtroom. Aarti Nachiappan, Sky News.
And we'll be talking to Aarti and a TikTok influencer in a moment. But first, several countries have already introduced restrictions on the app. Some have gone even further. Iran has entirely banned TikTok. India did too in 2020, and Afghanistan followed suit in 2022. Well, as you've been hearing, the proposed US bill would require TikTok's Chinese owner, ByteDance, to sell its stakes. But can anyone afford to buy it? Well, there are a few people putting together a consortium of investors. They include the former US Treasury Secretary, Steve Mnuchin, and the former head of games giant Activision. Well, Beijing has denied having any influence over the app, as our correspondent Nicole Johnson explains.
Well, Yalda, ByteDance, the Chinese company that owns TikTok, has about 9 months to sell its assets, to sell the app in the United States, or there will be a nationwide shutdown in that country. Now, US politicians say that TikTok, in effect, would allow China to spy on American citizens. But TikTok has released a statement. It has said that this US bill is effectively trampling on the rights of Americans. And it is expected that TikTok will seek an injunction for this order. All of this is taking place as the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken arrives in China, in Shanghai, for 3 days of meetings. There are some tough talks ahead. The big issue really is Russia. China is accused of sending dual-use items to Russia that have enabled it to continue to wage war in Ukraine. Now, China says that it is free to trade and have economic relations with anyone that it likes and that other countries shouldn't interfere. There's also the ongoing issue of China's assertive action in the Taiwan Strait and the South China Sea, which has been causing regional tension and trade tension as well, with the US accusing China of overproduction, especially in areas like electric vehicles. But really, Friday is the big day. That's when Secretary Blinken will be in Beijing and meet his Chinese counterpart, Wang Yi.
Well, that was Nicole Johnson reporting there. And as you heard, this action from the US comes against a backdrop of growing tensions with China. We'll get into that in a moment. Any sale or ban will impact many users who depend on the app to make a living. High street brands and music labels often turn to TikTok influence first to sell their products or promote new material. Well, Barney Banks is one of those creators. He has 1.7 million followers on the app.
Insecure, don't know what for. Turning heads when you walk through the door.
3, 2, 1. Go on then.
There he is.
What's your favourite Disney character at this point in time? Disney?
You just remember what your past said.
Come on, you got it. Get your hair. What do you look like, Lord Farquaad?
You moonwalk, click, click, tap, tap, tap. 1, 2, kick, kick, kick.
Well, Barney joins me here, and Artie, our technology correspondent, is here as well. Barney, I'll come to you. As I said, 1.7 million followers, although I feel like a lot of them follow you because your son is so cute. This ban could impact you in a massive sort of way as well.
Yeah, it definitely could. I feel like, you know, having this ban kind of looming is going to affect creators.
It is in the United States, by the way. It hasn't happened in this country.
Yeah, it is in the United States, but, you know, a lot of our, you know, followers or the people that watch my content, they're, you know, based in the US. So that immediately has a knock-on effect to people that, you know, work as creators, either full-time or part-time. You know, I've got a job as well. I didn't want to put all my eggs in one basket when it came to social media, so I actually have a job as well. But, you know, it does create, like, a significant issue when it comes to, you know, monetizing content, the fact that this ban's actually happening.
Yeah, I mean, as we said, you've got 1.7 million followers. That's a huge number. So you do generate a lot of income as a result, right, through sort of promoting products and things like that.
Exactly, yeah. You can either do it through sponsored posts or, you know, on TikTok itself, they have allowed people to generate income via, like, the Creator Fund and even the TikTok Shop as well. They've done a really good job at integrating, you know, ways to monetize your content and ways to, you know, have your own store online as well. But,
are you worried about, you know, the way that your data could be used?
I mean, yeah, there's of course going to be, like, you know, I'm aware that there are going to be issues possibly and that there are concerns. However, I just don't feel like across the board there seems to be, like, other social media platforms that have the same amount of data or the same data that I would input into the TikTok as well. So it seems like the issue kind of surrounds, you know, whoever owns the app itself.
Yeah, this war between China and the US. I'm going to bring you in, Artie, because, you know, Barney's talking about a lot of those who follow him are based in the US. He gets a lot of endorsements. That potential ban, it's something that Britain has often toyed with as well, but we don't face that ban. It's not imminent in this country.
No, I think that precedent is important. As you said earlier, there are a number of countries that have already banned TikTok, India being one of the previous biggest markets for the company. And so I think that the US is a country that the UK looks to for precedent at times. And so I think that if this does go through, there could be a little bit more pressure. But I think that one thing that's important to note is the demand for this ban, if it goes through, is not necessarily from the users. I mean, creators don't want that to happen. TikTok users don't want it to happen. So it raises the question of, you know, what kind of political benefit is there to seeming to act in this kind of area? If that's on data protection, that's something that I think the UK government wouldn't want to look behind on.
Tell us about the data protection, because obviously the US is saying this is a security risk, it's a national security risk.
And so when it comes to the data, if we think about the kind of data that social media companies gather, it's in their interest, their business interest, to gather as much as possible to know you as a person. So this can be things like the location you're accessing it from, the device you're using, or what your keystrokes are typing even. So what we know about TikTok's data gathering is not necessarily that different to what we know about Facebook's data gathering. So that's not necessarily where the issue is, but some critics have said that it's more China's legal backdrop that is a concern. There are certain laws that could mandate companies to pass on information to the government. And so what the United States officials are concerned about is that the 170 million users' data that they've gathered could be passed on to the government. And that's what they've said is the impetus for this move.
Well, we'll keep you both here and introduce our next guest. Let's go now and get the view of Matt Pottinger, who was a Deputy National Security Advisor for former US President Donald Trump. Matt, it's really good to see you. I mean, in this years-long technology battle between the US and China, it really does feel like America has landed a major punch here.
Yalda, it's good to be with you. Yeah, look, this was a very important bipartisan, overwhelming vote in both the House of Representatives and in the Senate, and with President Biden supporting it as well, so it becomes law. There are very few things today in America that you have this much consensus about, and yet here you had with supermajority votes in both of our chambers of the Congress, making this decision that the United States is perfectly happy to have TikTok so long as it is not controlled by the Chinese Communist Party. So the company, the Chinese company that governs, that runs TikTok, but is beholden to Chinese Communist Party officials, including senior party officials who work as the editor-in-chief and deputy editor-in-chief of TikTok's parent company, they're going to have to divest the company and allow Americans to own it so that it's people who are actually accountable under American law, and so that those algorithms, I've been listening to your other two guests talking about the data concerns, which are a real concern. The bigger problem with TikTok is that the algorithms that decide what content goes viral and what content dies is subject to the control of the Chinese Communist Party and their two senior officials who are the editors-in-chief of the company. So that no self-respecting free society could allow a totalitarian dictatorship to decide what makes the news and what doesn't.
Matt, I mean, in your role as Deputy National Security Advisor to former President Donald Trump, I mean, you were privy to a lot of, intelligence and security information and briefings. I mean, what were you seeing in terms of, the activities of a company like TikTok or ByteDance that's led this kind of movement to reach this position? Or can we just safely assume that any company that operates within China is directly serving the interests of the Chinese government?
Certainly, those are explicit laws in China that Xi Jinping has enforced over just the past few years that say that any data that comes into China, even if it's from a wholly foreign-owned enterprise, that data is subject not only to access by Chinese authorities, but is subject to the control of Chinese authorities. That's why when you had a rideshare company called Didi that went public on the stock exchange a few summers ago, the Chinese government ended up pulling down their app and sending their Ministry of State Security, that's the equivalent of the KGB, into their company to take control of all of their consumer data because they didn't want any private entity, even a Chinese private entity, to have control of that data.
So Matt, I mean, what our guests were saying here, and our technology reporter as well, is that, major tech companies, American-owned companies, are also collecting the data of everyone. So what's the difference?
Yeah. The difference is American companies that are collecting data, and by the way, I don't actually use social media, even American social media, for that reason.
The president does. The US president, has been campaigning on TikTok and now, is basically calling for a ban.
The difference is that those American companies collect a lot of data about you in order to try to sell your eyeballs, your mind, your preferences and desires to advertisers and to people selling products. with TikTok, the data goes to a Chinese government apparatus that wants to actually have access to you for much more nefarious purposes, whether it's spotting and assessing people to be compromised so that they can be useful to the Chinese regime, or whether it's to influence voter outcomes, because they know what people's voting preferences are, so they can then tweak the algorithms so that certain content goes to feed those biases in ways that could actually influence the outcomes of our elections. That's a very, very different use case for the data than the mere garden variety data security and data privacy issues with private companies. I don't want any of them to have access to that kind of data about me. But with one of them, they actually want to use the data to undermine my country and its democracy and people's faith in and credibility in our democracy. So, yeah.
Yeah, Matt, always fascinating to hear your views. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Barney, when you hear, someone like Matt Pottinger, who has been privy to all sorts of national security intelligence and information for many, many years, say all of that, does that kind of make you think twice about using TikTok?
I mean, again, I feel like the concern is definitely there, but a lot of what he's saying sounds like speculation on what could possibly happen or might be happening. I feel like, to what Artie said before, the users who have access to a lot of the information of what's going on around this ban, but through TikTok, through the app, and people are keeping in touch with all of it. I feel like via having access to that, none of the users actually want this ban to go ahead. Now, that might be biased because they use the app and some of them monetize on the app, but yeah, it just feels like the users aren't really, feeling this kind of this decision.
Are you hearing that from a lot of the users as well, Artie, that, look, this must be some kind of geopolitical sort of great power competition going on between the US and China, and what's this got to do with me?
Yeah, from the people I've spoken to, there has been a sense of a bit of a disconnect. And, I interviewed someone who's running a farm in Georgia, United States, and she was saying it wouldn't have been as big if we hadn't been able to grow on TikTok and market ourselves. And she was also saying, well, if you're concerned about security on this app, think about the other apps that you're using. So I think there is a little bit of a disconnect when it comes to what politicians kind of are believing is the best for users and what users may be believing is the best for themselves. But I do think that it's a bit of a difficult one when it comes to data protection, because it's also quite difficult to have the literacy on that subject.
And finally, Barney, I mean, you've got a hell of a lot of followers on TikTok, but you are diversifying. Because you fear that this may happen to you, and politicians may make that decision in this country.
Yeah, I mean, diversifying my content was something that I was already doing. It wasn't as a direct consequence of this potential ban. I feel like people should diversify content just because it gives you another voice on access to the people who view your content and allows you to open dialogue with long-form content like YouTube or a podcast or other short-form content apps like Instagram or Snapchat. It's always just good to diversify anyway. It's quite a volatile industry. Something that's popular today might not be popular tomorrow. So that's just something always to bear in mind, I think, as a content creator.
Barney, Artie, thank you both for joining us. Now stay with me as we're going to be hearing from the parents of a Hamas hostage next.
And if you can hear us, I am telling you, we are telling you, we love you, stay strong, survive.
Words of hope for their son and demands for a hostage deal as these grieving parents received proof of life.
And so I watched as you walk into some bar called the Black Dog and pierced new holes in my heart. You forgot to turn it off.
It's been absolutely amazing, honestly. We've had so many lovely Swifties kind of turn up, book in, rock up. The atmosphere has been intense but amazing, and we've seen such a massive impact already. Within 72 hours, kind of everything's changed for us.
The Black Dog has gone from Vauxhall to global. The speculation has been as to which one of Taylor Swift's ex-boyfriends frequents your pub. Do we know if Taylor's been in? Have you checked the CCTV?
I have to say we have, but, I don't want to give too much away. We do have a certain blonde regular who frequents, let's just say that.
And Taylor Swift is coming to the UK this summer, another stop on a huge global tour. Is there an open invite for her? Is there a couple of pints for her behind the bar?
Please, there's a whole keg. Honestly, we'd love to have her. But, you know, the Swifties have been amazing. We're already booked out for her tour dates. We're thinking about opening, you know, earlier, later as well. So the impact has been immense. The impact on socials have been crazy. You know, it truly is the Taylor Swift effect.
But it's been such a tough time, hasn't it, for the hospitality industry? What does this mean to the Black Dog?
I mean, you know, it has been a tough time. And one of the things that we're so thankful for is this opportunity. You can't plan for this. You can't buy this. You know, it's kind of a 1 in a million thing. And, you know, we want to honour this kind of opportunity that we've been given, but also keep our identity as, you know, a staple pub in Vauxhall. So we're looking for balance, but we're looking to, you know, embrace the Swifties.
Welcome back to the programme. Let's turn to the Middle East now. And today, Israel's defence forces say it hit 40 Hezbollah targets, which it says includes storage facilities and weapons. Hezbollah says it fired 2 missiles at a building in the northern Israeli village of Avivim, saying Israeli troops were taking positions inside it. Our international affairs editor Dominic Waghorn reports now from Herzog Medical Center in Jerusalem.
It is a significant escalation, one of Israel's biggest bombardments of Lebanon so far this war. 40 targets struck in one Israeli airstrike after another, in response to Hezbollah's shelling of northern Israel. The Israeli government released this video of Defense Minister Yoav Gallant saying Israel is targeting Hezbollah's command structure.
There is ongoing offensive action by IDF forces throughout southern Lebanon and also in other areas of Lebanon. The operational results are very impressive. Half of the Hezbollah commanders in southern Lebanon have been eliminated.
In the corridor, this is all sheltered because we're right under.
We're deep underground
here. We're deep underground. We're underneath the underground hospital.
Further south, Israelis are preparing for the war to escalate and become much worse.
Now, because it's built to withstand both biological and chemical attacks, we have an airlock which is built of 2 separate sets of blast doors.
We were given exclusive access to an emergency bunker deep under a Jerusalem hospital.
As you can see, it's also sealed off with steel doors.
In the last few months, they've been increasing capacity here to 350 beds, with more to come, extending the wards by another level underground to be ready for worst-case scenarios, like all-out war with Hezbollah, should it come.
The hospitals in the north will be overwhelmed with casualties, and they themselves may come under fire, in which case they'll have to evacuate patients to the centre of the country, the same as we did in the first week of the war with hospitals in the south.
Dr Kane and his staff know that after October the 7th and the attack by Iran, the world has changed for the people of Israel.
For the civilian population, we've never, since the War of Independence, We have never been in a situation where the threat to the civilian population has been as great.
Are you confident you'll be ready here?
Yes, absolutely, 100% confident that we'll be ready here in the hospital. Absolutely.
Above ground, the hospital specialises in the use of ventilators and the treatment of adults and children. If it comes to it, even these most vulnerable patients can be evacuated to the bunker in just a few hours.
So here, this is the clinic building, and we're building another bunker.
They are preparing for a reality they hope never comes. But the near constant exchange of fire with Hezbollah in the north is only intensifying. And with each day this goes on, the risk of far worse escalation is not going away. Dominic Waghorn, Sky News, Jerusalem.
Well, let's bring in Yaakov Katz, who specialised in Israel's security and is a former editor of the Jerusalem Post. Thank you very much, Yaakov, for joining us here on the programme. And the truth is that Israel has a major problem on its northern border, and it's not going away. It seems to be intensifying.
There's no doubt, Yalda. The fighting along the border with the north is nothing less than a war that Israel has been fighting against Hezbollah since October 7th. Israel was attacked down south from the Gaza Strip by Hamas with that horrific massacre that it carried out on October 7th. But since then, we've experienced thousands of missiles that have been fired into Israel by Hezbollah. Israel has struck back like it did today with that pretty significant airstrike across the south of Lebanon. But this is not going away, and you also have nearly 100,000 Israeli citizens who have had to evacuate their homes in the north as a result of the constant fighting there.
Yeah, and you know, we were in Beirut last week, our correspondents were, and Alex Crawford was saying that, you know, that many families have been moved from southern Lebanon as well as a result of the ongoing fighting. I mean, the fact is that even though Israel is saying that they are taking out many Hezbollah commanders, I mean, Hezbollah is putting up quite a fight and penetrating deep into, well, not deep, but into Israel at least.
Well, Hezbollah, if it wanted to, would be able to launch its rockets and missiles even deeper into Israel. They're believed to have, by Israeli intelligence, approximately 150,000 rockets and missiles that could cover all points within this country. Some of them are pre-GMs, are precision-guided munitions, which would give Hezbollah the ability to accurately target specific strategic targets, installations, military bases, critical infrastructure, etc., which has Israel very concerned. And I think as a result, you've seen that in the last 6.5 months, pretty much since October 7th, Israel has tried to refrain and hold back from having this war escalate. But what's happening is very simple. If Hezbollah were to stop attacking Israel, Israel would not be attacking Hezbollah. If Hezbollah were to move its guerrillas and its terrorist fighters, there's about 40 to 50,000 of them, away from the border with Israel, there would be no reason for Israel to have to fight with Hezbollah. But Hezbollah is taking advantage of what it believes to be a weakness of Israel in the aftermath of the Hamas attack and the continued war in the south, and thinks that it can also draw Israeli blood, which unfortunately too many people believe that's possible today.
And what we can see is, you know, the situation is literally one missile away from you know, you've said it's a war, but it feels up until now that it's being contained in like a small-scale war. But it feels like all it will take is, you know, sort of one mistake which could lead to some kind of escalation, and we could find ourselves in a situation where it is all-out war.
Oh, no, you're 100% right, Yalda. This one little miscalculation, one rocket that goes a bit deeper, too deep into Israel, one attack that Israel carries out in Lebanon that takes out either a too high-ranking Hezbollah commander or another strategic facility that will just lead both sides to believe, okay, now it's all-out war. And I think that is what Israel is mostly concerned about. That's why, for example, you saw a toned-down Israeli retaliation to that massive Iranian drone and ballistic missile attack just about 8-9 days ago. Israel, part of its reason for not attacking in a big way back in Iran was the fear that this would light up the border with Hezbollah and Lebanon. So it's very close, it's very dangerous, and it's very volatile. Just like
and just briefly, Yaakov, I mean, I was there just a few days ago in Jerusalem, and the mood music really was that this offensive in Rafah was imminent. You know, given what you're saying, and given, you know, the number of fronts that Israel is fighting, a number of battles, is this the belief that this will happen?
Look, Israel today is unfortunately the most attacked country in the world on multiple fronts: Gaza, Lebanon, Iran, Syria, the Yemen Houthis. But I think that what Israel is trying to do is to contain the fronts. It wants to focus on Hamas and Gaza. Like you said, the Rafah operation, which does appear to be imminent sometime in the next few days or weeks, that Israel will finally go into that southern Gaza town to take out those last Hamas battalions. And therefore, it doesn't want to be distracted. It wants to be able to focus on one front at a time. But it doesn't always depend on what Israel wants, right? The enemies and the Iranian proxies have their own plans, and that could disrupt what Israel hopes to do in Gaza.
Yaakov, thank you, as always, for joining us here on the programme. Now, get the deal done now. The message from the parents of an Israeli hostage who has been held in Gaza for more than 200 days. The plea to leaders in hostage negotiations comes after Hamas released a video appearing to show Israeli-American Hersh Goldberg Pollen the first proof of life that he has survived after being kidnapped from Nova Music Festival on October the 7th.
We are the parents of Hersh Goldberg Pollen, an American-Israeli civilian who was kidnapped into Gaza 201 days ago.
Seeing a video of Hersh today is overwhelming. We're relieved to see him alive, but we are also concerned about his health and well-being, as well as that of all of the other hostages and all of those suffering in this region. And we're here today with a plea to all of the leaders of the parties who have been negotiating to date. That includes Qatar, Egypt, the United States, Hamas, and Israel. Be brave, lean in, seize this moment, and get a deal done to reunite all of us with our loved ones and to end the suffering in this region.
And Hersh, if you can hear this, we heard your voice today for the first time in 201 days. And if you can hear us, I am telling you, we are telling you, we love you, stay strong, survive.
Well, let's bring in our Alistair Bunkle, who joins us from Jerusalem. And I mean, Ali, the desperate sort of pleas and calls of that hostage. We've seen, we don't know when it was filmed, but some proof of life there in that video. And of course, in line with not showing hostage videos, we won't be showing our viewers that video. But really, you know, that message couldn't be clearer from his parents.
Yeah, no, you're right. We won't show the video, but in it, he says that he's been held for almost 200 days, and he speaks about the Passover festival, the Jewish festival that's being celebrated right now. So the indications are that it was filmed quite recently. He looks, as you'd expect, very pale, tired. He's a very handsome young man. His poster, his photo is up everywhere, particularly around where I live, because he comes from close to where I live. So you see it everywhere. And he also has in his left hand the stump from where he's lost his hand, because he lost it during the attack on the Nova Music Festival. And so what is very clear from watching the video is the ordeal that he has been through and is going through. And he says in it that he's very angry at Benjamin Netanyahu and the Israeli government. But of course, we don't know the conditions under which that video was filmed and whether it was filmed under duress or not. His parents there, you know, they must feel an element of relief to see that he is alive, because not having heard from him for 201 days, they would have had doubts as to whether or not he survived or not. So there's, I'm guessing, relief there, but also desperation to get him out. And that is why, following the release of that video tonight, the streets of Jerusalem erupted in protest around the house of Benjamin Netanyahu. We were down here, the police were using water cannon to try and disperse the crowds. But people are getting very frustrated and fed up that more than 200 days now of this war, more than 200 days of this hostage crisis, and not only are the 133 hostages still being held, there is, frankly, no sign of the negotiations going anywhere right now, and therefore no sign that those hostages could be released anytime soon.
Yeah, Ali, those protests really have been gaining momentum.
Yeah, they have, because Benjamin Netanyahu, who's now been power in this latest stint for about a year and a half, close on a year and a half, was really unpopular last year because of the judicial reforms. And then October the 7th came around and the country united behind the military campaign in Gaza. The country, Israelis are still behind the IDF, but they're becoming increasingly disenchanted with the Israeli government, led by Benjamin Netanyahu. They want to see people taking responsibility for what happened on October the 7th. They blame the leaders, they blame Netanyahu. They do not believe that Netanyahu is the man to see them through this war. They do not believe that Netanyahu is the right man to negotiate the release of the hostages. And so you are seeing these protests grow in size and in anger.
Ali, thank you so much for that update there from Jerusalem. Well, this is The World with me, Yalda Hakim. Now, we've been talking a lot about student protests this week, namely those ones in the United States. We'll be live in California next as police continue to arrest demonstrators. Welcome back to the programme. Now, there's been a fresh wave of protests against the war in the Middle East at university campuses across the United States. The latest have seen police wrestle with students in Texas and California. Let's show you these live pictures now in Texas, where you can see that confrontation between students and police. Many of the students gathered there are pro-Palestinian demonstrators. And these demonstrations have really gained momentum across the United States, as we've said, and we have been reporting from Columbia University. Just yesterday, we spoke to a student who was arrested. She was charged. She will go to court in May. She said the demonstrations were peaceful, but many Jewish students said that they felt intimidated and that there were anti-Semitic remarks and slurs and chants being made. But again, these students deny that and say that that could have been from agitators who have come from the outside. But you can see there the situation in Texas. Things are intensifying on these university campuses, and arrests have been made. Let's go now to our US correspondent, Martha Kellner, who joins me from the University of Southern California in Los Angeles, where one of the protests have been taking place. And Martha, as I was saying there, I mean, these demonstrations have really intensified. We've seen confrontation between students, faculty staff, and police, with a number of arrests made. We saw at Columbia University, but I understand it's also taking place on campuses in California as well.
That's right, Yalda. These pro-Palestinian student protests have now spread from the east coast of America, where they started at Columbia University in New York, to the north and south of these divided states, and now to the west of America, where I am at the University of Southern California in Los Angeles. These protests taking place now at more than a dozen campuses. The protests at their core here, as well as at those other campuses, are about the war in Gaza and the loss of civilian life. But speaking to students here, you can see them joining in with chants here. Speaking to them, they believe that they're protesting for two main reasons. The first is a demand that this university cut financial ties with Israel. The second reason is more specific to this university. There is a top student here known as a valedictorian student. She is a Muslim student. She was due to speak at the university's graduation next month. Well, that speech was cancelled, the university administrators say, because of safety concerns. They haven't said specifically what the threat was as a result of that speech, but they said there were unnamed threats made around that speech, which is why they cancelled it. But that has caused a great deal of anger here. You can see these protests at the moment are relatively well ordered, relatively well mannered, although I have heard some inflammatory, potentially anti-Semitic statements being made. But earlier on, this scene here did turn quite nasty. The police had to intervene. They took away at least one student who was later released. We're not entirely clear on just how many, if any, arrests were made here. But we do know that at the University of Texas in Austin, there were at least 10 arrests of students made, and around the perimeter of this protest there is a line of around 30 or 40 campus police I have counted. I was speaking to one of those police officers who says that they hope that this will remain peaceful, that this protest will remain peaceful. But as always, they are wary of the potential of it turning violent, and they've been monitoring what's been happening both in Texas and on the east coast of America. And I think these protests are showing once again the fine line here between free speech and hate speech, between free speech and anti-Semitism, and that's being tested every day that these protests continue.
Yeah, Martha, as you say, they've been seriously tested, and we were just looking there at those images of the arrests of those students in California, and of course arrests being made in Texas as well. We will be following the developments there, but Martha, for now, thank you so much. And as I said, we will be following all the developments there of those student protests in the United States. Now, Myanmar's civil war has driven thousands of people into neighbouring Thailand in the past months during intensifying violence along the border. For months, Myanmar's military government has been losing ground to pro-democracy militias and ethnic armed groups. Well, Myawaddy, Myanmar's most important trading town with Thailand, was one of the latest to fall. Our Asia correspondent Cordelia Lynch has the latest from Myanmar's border with Thailand.
After a long and bloody civil war, Myanmar's military regime is under unprecedented pressure. Rebel groups have gained critical ground, and here on the Thai border, there is tension in the air. This is where thousands of people fled escalating violence at the weekend. We have been on patrol with the Thai police, speaking with the Thai army, and inside a hospital treating the critically injured. This feels like a major inflection point and a regime teetering on the brink.
Myanmar is at risk of collapse. The long civil war has taken a major turn, and Thailand is in the firing line. Just days ago, officers dodged bullets here at the border, fired from across the river. A newly empowered resistance clashing with a military on the brink. It's created an exodus Thailand must now manage, trying to be both protector and enforcer.
We're on patrol with the Thai police along the border with Myanmar. They have stepped up their operations here in recent months, along with the Thai military, because the civil war in Myanmar has spilled over into Thailand. This area has heard and seen intense fighting.
The police told us they're arresting around 30 people a day crossing illegally. Many young men trying to run away from conscription. Up here, you can see the new battle lines. Just a couple of weeks ago, a town controlled by the military for decades that few ever thought would fall, suddenly did.
Just over there is the town of Myawaddy. It is strategically important, known as the gateway to Thailand. The fact the rebels have just taken control of it is a humiliating and symbolic defeat for the Myanmar military regime. It is a sign it is struggling to keep control.
The army reportedly launched an operation to retake it. But watch as their convoy is attacked. Rebels taking over their vehicles. Some Thai soldiers say they saw it coming.
I felt the resistance groups were well prepared. There were signs before they attacked. My unit could see their manpower and their weapons, and there were civilians waiting along the river, getting ready to cross over.
But it's now in flux and could change hands yet again. This video shows junta soldiers yesterday raising a flag there. Nini is among those who've secretly escaped the trouble in Myanmar. He claims the authorities are torturing activists, an allegation we put to the military government, who have not responded.
They starve people, put them in stress positions and beat them until they bleed from their ears. When we were fleeing, most of my friends got arrested by the military. They were interrogated and tortured. They trained them for just 3 weeks and then sent them to the front line.
At the Mae Tao clinic, you can see the brutality of the conflict in those who managed to flee. Myanmar says he was hit by a military airstrike that killed his 2 daughters.
They were hiding in a school. I thought it would be safe. After the bomb, I saw the body of one of my daughters ripped apart.
Dr Cynthia Mang is caring for 500 new patients every day.
Does this feel as bad as it's ever been since the coup?
Yeah, this is one of the worst. This, in my time, in 35 years here, this was the worst situation, one of the worst situations on the border here.
These are the faces of a deepening humanitarian crisis. caught in the crosshairs of a relentless insurgency and embattled regime. Now, so too are Myanmar's neighbours.
There have been some important developments. The Karen National Union say they have temporarily retreated from Myawaddy after we saw that handful of soldiers raising a flag at a military base. But we also know that rebel groups are still on the road. They are focusing their efforts on a military convoy trying to make its way to Myawaddy. The truth is, it's very unclear who might ultimately control Myawaddy. There are very shifting allegiances, a lot of different complex factions, and it is a town that's economically very important to a lot of stakeholders. We do know, though, that the Myanmar military regime is looking weaker than it has for a very long time. That doesn't mean that a change in power is imminent, but I think we will see a lot more activity in the coming days and weeks. Whatever the result, we can expect, I think, a lot more chaos and instability.
Cordelia Lynch with that report. Well, This is the World with me, Yalda Hakim. The skies over Greece turned red today. But why did Athens look like the surface of Mars? Well, we'll find out next. Stay with us.
I'm Adam Parsons. I'm Sky's Europe correspondent based here in Brussels. Cobbles have been pulled up out and are being used as missiles to hurl at these police. Made by people who dare to challenge. Nice to see you again, Mr. Barnier. Why? Meeting you. Fishing does have the potential to stymie an enormous economic deal. We take you to the heart of stories that shape our world. What strikes you when you come to this glacier is not just the way in which the environment is changing, but the speed at which those changes are happening.
Welcome back. Now, skies over Athens have turned completely orange as a cloud of dust blew from the Sahara Desert to mainland Greece, resembling something from a sci-fi movie. The capital was turned temporarily into a city from Mars rather than Earth. It's all because of sandstorms in the Sahara. Just to have a look. Incredible images, and as we've said, it looks like something out of Mars rather than Earth. Well, that's it from the team and I here on The World. We're going to leave you with these live pictures from the University of Texas, UT, in Austin, where, as we've said, students have been protesting. They're pro-Palestinian demonstrators, and we have also seen some arrests on this campus, but frankly, we've seen arrests across the United States at Columbia University and various others. Good night from us.